Longevity Junkie. It's time to get your fix. I'm Nikki Lee, the OG Longevity Junkie.
And I'm Buck Joffrey, the health-conscious hedonist.
And coming up, we talk with Dr. Joseph Maroon, an 83-year-old professor of neurosurgery and a triathlete. And we dive into more medical madness of Reddit on Reddit. So, Buck, how are you doing? It's holiday season.
Doing okay. How are you? You got big plans for Christmas and all? What are you doing?
You know, I actually do. I asked my mom permission if I could skip Christmas at home this year, and she gave me the green light. So I am going on a cruise to the Bahamas.
Well, that's awesome.
I know.
That's a good way to spend it. You know,
right?
Yeah, totally. I mean, if I was without children, I would absolutely. I wouldn't be sticking around at all. But
yeah, exactly. I'm going on one of these Virgin cruises. So A, definitely no kids. And B, we have a pajama party and all these things. And it's all going to be in like holiday spirit for sure. Because I know the pajama party is like Christmas themed. So it's like people are going to be jolly and happy.
Yeah, that sounds kind of interesting. So where so is the Caribbean, like what part of the Caribbean?
So I'll land into Miami, and then I will be going to Honduras, some other place in the Bahamas, and it's just like it's a full week. Yeah, it's a full week. But Honduras will be the country that I have never been to. So it'll be another country on my little Yeah, I'm excited.
That's cool. You know, one of the traditions, did you ever do this? Wasn't around when I was a kid, but this whole Elf on the Shelf thing. Did you
I
have
was
that
like,
when you were
is he
a kid?
going to say Elf on the Shelf?
Yeah.
Yet I never did it, but I love the idea.
Was that around like 20 years or 30 years ago or whatever? I never heard of it.
Honestly, I don't know. I want to just because I only don't know because it wasn't in my family and it wasn't any family around me. But I don't know. I feel like maybe 15 years ago or just after I believed in Santa Claus, maybe it started, or didn't believe in Santa Claus. I mean, I kind of still do.
Yeah.
Tim Allen has convinced me that Santa Claus is real.
Yeah, there you go. So just so people don't know, Elf on the Shelf, basically there's a elf that comes in, it's like 10 days before Christmas, depends on what you want, I guess, but 10 days before Christmas. And he's this elf that is sort of the elf of your children. And, he kind of watches the children every day to see if they're being good or bad or whatnot. Mm-hmm. He's taking notes. And so what you do with
like
the elf.
Santa's eyes.
Yeah. So every day the elf comes somewhere else. He's sitting somewhere else. So like the kids get super excited and they wake up and they look for the elf. In our case, it's Jack the elf.
Oh, Jack.
And so they're like, "Where's Jack? Where's Jack?" Of course.
How did we get Jack? How did we get that?
I think I just
because there's
made
Jack
it up.
Frost.
I think I just made it up. I don't know. This was this has been several years. I'm my oldest daughter's in high school. So I don't think she really buys it anymore. I don't know. Maybe she does. But
you have to hide it every day, right?
Oh, it's really stressful, actually.
Yeah, for parents, it's a lot.
Right, because I actually set an alarm every night that says Jack on it.
That's so funny.
And I remember like one year my so my youngest is like 9 still, so she's totally in it still. But I remember my middle one who's 12, I think like a year or two ago, she saw this thing flash up at an alert at like 9:00 on my phone that said Jack. And she's like, "Why is Jack coming up on your phone?" And I was like, "I don't know. He might be texting me. Let me." So it's a big thing. Now it became more complicated after, because we're divorced and Jack has to go back and forth between homes.
Oh, shoot.
Yeah. So we had to buy another Jack, basically.
Yeah, I was going to say, you just buy the Jack. Okay.
Buy another Jack, and the tradition continues. I think my 12-year-old still kind of believes in it. I still think she's, like her friends say, there's no Santa Claus, no, all this, but I think she's still holding out some hope.
I love that.
Yeah, my youngest one's Clementine. We call her Tiny, and she's all over this. Like, Santa Claus, cookies, stuff like that. She writes notes.
That's so cute.
It's a big deal for her. So it's exciting. And she doesn't listen to this podcast, so it's good. She doesn't.
Right. Thank goodness. Right. She won't be interested in this podcast for probably a few years. Then by that time, it'll be fine. Yeah, for sure. Oh, I love it. Well, I hope you guys have the best traditions. That's super fun. Okay, well, now let's get back to work.
Yeah, get back to work. No more fun here, okay?
Okay, so we're going to highlight another unusual Reddit story about health and longevity. And of course, add our own scientific spin to outrageous or awkward situations. So this is Reddit on Reddit. All right, here's the story. I work in a medical ICU, and I had a patient who came to the ER and was super drunk already. Patient proceeded to sign himself out of the ER and go to a bar nearby the hospital, get slammed on 4 Locos, according to him, and come back to the ER. Wow. Patient's alcohol level was over 500. He was admitted to the ICU under my care and went through a rough withdrawal phase for roughly 2 weeks until he started becoming himself again, to the point where he used to ambulate around the unit with me to get sandwiches and coffee since that's what he craved. Detox unit finally accepted him as a patient and he was transferred there. And I said my goodbyes to him and we parted ways. Come to my surprise, patient ended up sneaking 5 bags of hand sanitizer on the detox unit with an alcohol level of 328. Transferred back to the medical ICU and of course under my care, and was put on a 4-point restraints all over his body due to his aggressive and violent behavior. And now we are going through another terrible withdrawal phase. Oh my God.
I mean, that's a straight up alcoholic, right? I mean, and so, you know, alcoholism is a disease. And, you know, it's interesting because you can kind of tell, and, you know, there are some stuff, there's some ways of kind of telling if, you know, you have that disease versus you just like to drink a lot. Like some of those signs, like, you know, blacking out, more likely you're an alcoholic. You're forgetting your, you know, one of the classic things is like, people have certain, like when they click into a personality, you know what I mean? That's pretty good sign of alcoholism.
Like their drunk personality?
Yeah. When they have like a totally different personality. You know what I mean? You know people that?
Yeah.
Like they click and all of a sudden they become this like reckless, crazy person that you know that person, but it's not the other person that you know when they're not drunk.
Right.
That's a pretty good sign of alcoholism. But,
yeah, for sure. They'll use it as a crutch. I had a friend who would drink all of the time.
Yeah.
And like bring your own case of beer over.
Yeah.
I mean, it was insane.
So it's really like a disease, though. I mean, it really is. You have to treat it that way. Like, again, it's one of those addiction disease things. So what is it? What are your takes on this?
I mean, to go back, I love that he would like hang out with her, you know, and like go get some coffee and get like sandwiches. And it sounded like he had a pretty good detox stage in that sense. And then he, you know, was admitted to the detox unit or whatnot. And then goes right back to it. I think it's because he was lonely. Like he missed her. He missed his girl.
Yeah.
You know, he missed his friend. Because the detox, like I don't know this personally, however, but like I do understand that the detox part of it, you know, when you're coming off of something, whether it be drugs or alcohol or whatever, there's a huge withdrawal and that's like really tough on your body. And sometimes you're like, just screw it. I don't even want to go through this. Let me just drink or take that drug or do whatever again because to get out of it because it's that intense. So I don't know. It's kind of shitty for him because I feel like he was really on a good way out, you know, like getting through it. Like now he's in the detox center. Like he just you only had a little bit more because you had already your first 2 weeks, you know? So that's really shitty. And I feel kind of bad for her too. She's like, I thought I cured you because you go into the medical business to help people and you're like, damn it, you were back, you know?
Yeah. So there's a few things just to, you know, might be helpful to understand.
By the way?
Yeah, so 500 is equivalent. The 500 is equivalent to like 0.5% blood alcohol. and that's like 6 times legal levels.
Well, yeah, our legal level is blowing a 0.08, right?
Right. For, yeah. 0.08 for over
0.08.
21. Yeah. 0.08. So that's a pretty decent, I mean, so
Yeah,
that's like,
to 5%.
yeah. So that would, that 0.5% would be in that area where you'd be concerned about it being life threatening, potential for like coma,
Coma.
death, people who kind of get in that range. They often have chronic exposures, and it leads to some tolerance there. So they may be less likely to get into trouble. In other words, like, I remember there was like some crazy case involving a pilot who was fired because he was drunk. It was like, could you remember this? A commercial pilot. And his defense was, well, I'm an alcoholic. I can handle my liquor. So those numbers don't really apply to me, but he probably had a point to like some theoretical fact, but,
that's ballsy to say.
Yeah.
That's a ballsy thing to say. I mean,
So,
alcohol is cute. It's super, it makes you like aggressive. He was even aggressive. So why does alcohol make you aggressive?
Well, it affects the brain's prefrontal cortex.
Yep.
Which, that's involved with judgment, impulse, and it also disrupts serotonin levels, which we know are involved with mood. I mean, selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors like Prozac are used for depression and things like that.
It spikes dopamine levels, right? It like gives you really highs and then like really, really lows.
I think it does, but I don't know if that's the aggression part. But there is some heightening of like this brainstem activity called the amygdala, part of the amygdala, and that's like really intensifies emotional responses.
Well, it goes through the blood-brain barrier.
Yeah, for sure.
And that's it. Also, after, like, what I learned is after, even just like a drink or two, like that's why they call it truth serum, because what it actually does is your filter, like if you don't want to say something because, oh, that would be rude, like that filter part of your brain actually dissipates as alcohol goes through the blood-brain barrier. So that's why you just kind of say whatever, you don't care.
Yeah, totally. And so bottom line is, like, we know that alcoholism is not a good thing. It's a disease. People need to get some help on that. But I guess the other thing, just to comment on while we're at it, is, there was this whole thing for a long time, the French paradox, and people believed that somehow the fact that the French were drinking red wine was why they didn't seem to get heart disease at the same levels as Americans, despite the fact that, they sit around eating cheese all the time, right? Or like a lot of, pretty fatty foods and stuff like that. But we know now is that really there really is no benefit to alcohol. And I don't say that as somebody who doesn't like alcohol, because I kind of do. But I think trying to put some sort of justification on there, like, oh yeah, red wine's really good for you. Actually, it's not true. Don't fool yourself. It's not. So no amount of alcohol is good for you. The question is how much is really bad for you. And, it's statistically, if you keep it under, for under like 7 drinks per week, there's not really any statistics that say it's really going to hurt you. That's kind of what I try to do. Like I try to keep like 7 or under in terms of like cocktails or a glass of wine or whatever.
Actually, I have come across a study that even like having a drink or two a day does still cause degeneration to your brain. There is a study, and it's I believe it. I mean, just think about it this way too. It's like, even if like people go, oh, I only drink on the weekends, right? And but hey, when I only drank on the weekends, like that Saturday, I probably had like, I don't know, 6 shots of tequila. You know what I mean? So like that will still then average, multiple drinks a day out of a 7-day period, and so you might only limit it to that day. But if those days are hardcore partying, or you just, have a like hell, I'd go to Sunday brunch and have bottomless mimosas because I want to get my money's worth. And that was like 7 things of champagne. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it gets crazy. So there's definitely degeneration of the brain.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, bottom line is it's not good for you.
It's not good for you. It's a poison. It's a literal poison, people. It's legitimately a poison.
But I still kind of like it. So
no, and do what you want.
I'm as a health conscious hedonist, I'm trying to draw the line between what I can do without killing myself.
It's pick and choose your battles. I mean, I'm grateful. I haven't had a drink in over 2 years. I'm super excited about it. My sleep is better. I wake up refreshed. I can't even imagine having, and plus I don't gain weight as much from alcohol. Like you would just have these empty calories. And when I wake up, I can't imagine having a hangover again. I've had it and it's been like death, literally. And I could not. I just feel like I couldn't do that.
I definitely don't drink heavily. I have this issue. Basically, if I have 2 drinks and I'm I like to kind of get that, like, I'm happy. But if I have one more drink, if I have one more drink, and this is the good thing, I don't have an alcoholic gene at all. I go from I'm happy to I want to go to sleep now. And then it's no fun. I don't have any, like some people, like the more they drink, the more they want to party. It's not me. It's never been me. And in that regard.
Is that, by the way? Do you know?
Yeah, it's a little part of the whole alcoholic thing. Again.
Okay.
Yeah.
I didn't know if it maybe did something to like your inner clock of like, we're not tired. It just like keeps you going. I don't know how it keeps you going because it's a depressant.
I know. I
don't get it.
For me, it's a depressant for sure.
Yeah.
But anyway, so let's, so in terms of like, okay, so obviously, alcoholism, there's all sorts of things you could do, probably start with a 12-step program, all that, trying to get that under control. But even for people who are looking to potentially drink less, there's ways to kind of pharmacologically do that too. There's a medication called naltrexone, which is something you might be able to talk to your doctor about, which what it does is it blocks the pleasure centers from drinking and actually reduces cravings. So this is something that like, a friend of mine asked me about this because he's definitely not an alcoholic, but he's overweight, but he comes home and he likes to have like a beer or 2, right? Which I don't think from the standpoint of he's not an alcoholic, but it is pure empty calories. And for a guy who's got a big old belly, that's not a great thing. And he knows it, but he's like, I just want it so badly. So for somebody like that, like, getting your doctor to write some naltrexone and maybe just kind of breaking that craving cycle might not be a bad idea. What else we can kind of talk about here in terms of this is, what happens to an alcoholic? Like they shouldn't just stop drinking. Right? They can't, because if you're an alcoholic, you can get a severe form of alcohol withdrawal that typically occurs 2 to 4 days after heavy drinking, and it can be even later. But it's a medical emergency. It's like called delirium tremens or DTs, and you get confusion, agitation, hallucinations, tremors, seizures. You could die from this.
Actually, I've heard you can literally die. A friend of mine was a severe alcoholic, and we were talking about like we can't just cold turkey him. Like he's the type that we would need to give a shot or a day or something. Like he had to have it, otherwise he would die. I was like, oh my god.
Right. And so what happens is a sudden, like suddenly you stop, and it disrupts the brain's neurotransmitter balances, which are used to the downer effect of the alcohol, and it creates this hyperexcitability. The mortality rate is like 37% in untreated cases. I mean, literally 1 in 3 people who get DTs, if they're not treated for it, will die. That's crazy, right?
That is crazy.
So typically what they do is like if somebody's in withdrawal, they get DTs, you get put on benzodiazepines like diazepam, like Ativan, whatever, reduces agitation, seizures. People get, put in the hospital. They get IV fluids, electrolytes. try to, get some monitoring sometimes in the ICU. But anyway, it's a serious problem. Delirium tremens is a serious medical emergency and something that need to be treated. The hand sanitizer thing?
Yeah, the hand sanitizer because it has alcohol in it. Well, I mean, desperate times call for desperate measures.
The problem is that hand sanitizers, they have ethanol, which is, but they usually also have other kinds of alcohols in them, like methanol, which can cause blindness. And all sorts, you can die basically from other kinds of alcohol. So not a great idea. Wow. Not a great idea.
I did not know that. That's really
yeah.
That guy could have just been. He definitely had a death wish or something.
Well.
Okay. Oh, now serious.
Okay, move on. Let's move on.
All right, we're going to take a break. When we come back, we'll talk with Dr. Joseph Maroon, an 83-year-old clinical professor and triathlete who says he's too busy to slow down. I'm really excited for this. Welcome back to Longevity Junky. Time for our guest interview. It's the breakdown with Dr. Joseph Maroon. Dr. Joseph Maroon is the embodiment of use it or lose it, and he's committed to using all he's got to the fullest extent for as long as he's got it. At 83, he's a clinical professor of neurological surgery at the University of Pittsburgh Medical Center, as well as the consulting neurosurgeon of the Pittsburgh Steelers and a consultant to World Wrestling Entertainment. Although Maroon stopped doing neurosurgery about 5 years ago, he does clinical research on a variety of topics that he said will have applications for prostate cancer, Alzheimer's disease, and Parkinson's disease. And he exercises about an hour a day. Also, he came in first in his age bracket at the Chicago Triathlon in 2022. Welcome, Dr. Maroon.
Thank you very much, Ricky. I know everybody on this program fact checks pretty well. So I did win my age group a year and a half or two ago at the Chicago Triathlon, which is one of the largest in the world, actually. But I have to tell you, I was the only one in my age group.
Well, that's a victory in itself, I think, right?
I think so, too.
So, Nikki, I think you missed this, but Dr. Maroon was really good friends with my chairman at University of Michigan Neurosurgery, Buzz Hoff. They were like brothers, he said. And then also my mentor at Northwestern, which was Dr. Hunt Bazier, both great neurosurgeons, legendary neurosurgeons. And Dr. Maroon and I were catching up earlier. He was real good friends with both of them.
Yep. Oh my God! Wow, is it a small world in the neurosurgery land?
It is small.
Yeah, it really is. And both of them were, both my heroes actually. Buzz Hoff at Michigan was an incredible doctor, neurosurgeon, and his predecessor, Dr. Schneider, was really the first neurosurgeon to get involved with head and neck injury in sports and wrote many papers and books that really was my inspiration to get involved quite a few years ago.
He was a chairman at Michigan, and that was the focus of his research back then.
Oh, gotcha.
And I think he was an inspiration for Dr. Maroon. So that we're talking about a generation before him.
Yeah, we're going back in history here, Nikki.
Did he have any influence of why you offered any position with the Pittsburgh Steelers?
I played football myself at Indiana University. When I grew up in Bridgeport, Ohio, in the Ohio Valley, it's a town of 3,000 people, 5 bars, and 30 dogs. If you finished high school, even if you did, you had 3 options. You either worked in the steel mills, the coal mines, or you got an athletic scholarship. And I was very fortunate to go to Indiana University, which is now 10-0 here for the first time in history. And I went there, played football, and had quite a few concussions myself. I was the smallest guy in the Big Ten when I played. And when I came to Pittsburgh, I started to put on concussion and how to protect the head and brain in sports. And the first several years when I was on call at the emergency room at the University of Pittsburgh, a quadriplegic high school kid was brought in from playing football. And I was, having played, how I could have happened to me. So I wrote a paper I looked at the epidemiology of neck injuries in Western Pennsylvania and found out that you had a 1 in 10,000 chance of being quadriplegic at the end of the season, which is horrendous. So I started doing instructional clinics for coaches, families, players. And this got the attention of Chuck Noll, Super Bowl champion, and also Mr. Rooney, Dan Rooney, the owner. And they asked me to consult on some of the players in the 70s. And this was their, the real prime time for the Steelers. So Lynn Swann and Franco Harris, Stallworth, and others. So I started to get interested in that, and then I got involved heavily. And then eventually, I was challenged by Coach Noll when I told him his starting quarterback couldn't play against the Cowboys the next week. Why not? He had a concussion. He looks good to me. He can throw the ball. He knows his plays. I said, guidelines say he has to stay out a minimum of 2 weeks. Who wrote the guidelines? What criteria did you use? So it was a very significant challenge. And he said, Maroon, if you want me to keep somebody out, I want objective data, not specious guidelines. So I went to Mark Lovell, a neuropsychologist, a brilliant neuropsychologist at the time, and we put together this neurocognitive test called IMPACT, Immediate Post-Athletic Cognitive Test, which is a 20-minute test that assesses one's memory, ability to process information, and brain speed. And we baselined the team. Fast forward, this year we've tested 25 million kids with this test, and it's become the standard of care in the NFL, NHL, NASCAR, thousands of high schools. And it was all due to the challenge by Coach Noll to want something better to evaluate players. And, it wasn't planned, but it was a very, very significant advance in preventing head and neck injuries in sports.
Yeah, it's not usually the thing on coach's mind or anyone owning a team like that. It's more win, 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 get a ring.
Well, that was not the case with him. He realized that his best assets were the players, and a healthy player is even better. And he really was creative, innovative, and highly demanding of the best care. Still is. The Steelers are going to win the Super Bowl again this year, as you know.
There you go. I love it. Already having predictions. I love it.
I've been saying that about the Minnesota Vikings since I was about 6 years old.
I love it. Well, let's rewind a little bit, because I know you've had an incredible journey to become a neurosurgeon and a triathlete in your 80s. Can you tell us about your health and fitness early on in life?
When I finished my residency at Indiana University in neurosurgery, I was at Georgetown, Oxford University, and the University of Vermont, and came to Pittsburgh. I was dead set on being the best neurosurgeon I possibly could be, which meant working 24/7 and sacrificing a whole lot of other things. And after about 8 to 10 years, I had a midlife crisis, if you would, because I was so, in quotes, successful. My family broke up, and within the course of a week, my wife left. My father died of a massive heart attack at age 60, and I had to quit neurosurgery because I was pathologically depressed and simply couldn't function. And my father bequeathed to my mother a very heavily mortgaged, dilapidated, dirty truck stop in Wheeling, West Virginia. So I had to quit neurosurgery, and I literally moved into an old farmhouse in the middle of winter and flipped hamburgers and filled up 18-wheelers for a year. So I went from being chief of neurosurgery to literally doing that. filling up 18-wheelers and wondering what in the world's, how did this happen?
Yeah.
And nothing worked, drugs, psychotherapy. I was very depressed. And the banker who held the mortgage on the truck stop called me one day and said, Maroon, let's go for a run. You need to get out. And I think he wanted to see if I'd be around long enough to pay off the mortgage. And I went down to the high school track. We made it around 4 times. I said, never again. But that night was the first night I slept in months. So the next day I went down myself and did 1.25 miles, and then 1.5 miles, then 2, 3, 4, 5. And I read about triathlons, and I cross-trained. I got a bike. I learned to swim. As the unintended side effect of doing the physical and aerobic activity, I was rebooting my neurotransmitters, elevating my serotonin and endorphins and cannabinoids without drugs, and starting to feel better, lose weight, and eventually get over the depression and started feeling fairly decent about myself again, and was able to return to neurosurgery. But I continued the regimen of swimming, biking, and running, and then entered into a sprint triathlon, 300-meter swim, 10-mile, 15-mile bike, and a 10K run. And I felt like Roger Bannister breaking the
4-minute mile.
4-minute mile. And then I continued gradually to work out, exercise, raise the bar until I got into the Hawaiian Ironman triathlon, which is a 2.4 mile swim, 112 bike, and a marathon by a lottery. And when I got accepted, then I had to do it. So I had to train. And subsequently, it's been a part of my life. So I've done 8 Ironman distance races, 5 in Kona, with the World Championship, and then New Zealand, Germany, and Canada. So, but it became a part of my life, not to boast about that, but if I hadn't walked around that high school track 4 times, I wouldn't be talking to you today. Let me put it that way. So I got back to the best part of my life. Coming back, I realized what's really important. There's a great book entitled The Second Mountain. The first mountain we climb is that mountain of ego gratification, approbation, validation, who we are, until we realize, like I did with the crisis, that that's really not what's really important in life. And the second mountain is that mountain of giving back, creating, and the reward that comes really from helping others. So I'm on that second mountain now, as you might say, and having more fun than I ever have.
I want to shift gears a little bit here and start talking about your professional work, which is, has been tremendous contributions. I want to focus on some of the studies that you published fairly recently on oxidative stress in Alzheimer's and Parkinson's disease. Can you talk about that and as it relates to maybe some of the previous theories on the formation of or the causes of Alzheimer's disease and what your new perspective on that is?
You really touched on a subject that I am now absolutely passionate about. 3 years ago, I was introduced to a physician or a PhD biophysicist by the name of Prabhat Mandal, who is the director of the Indian National Brain Institute in Gurgaon, India. We've now published several papers, primarily with his incredible work using MRS. Magnetic resonance spectroscopy is a technique that uses MRIs to image the biochemical metabolites in the brain. In other words, we can measure the chemicals of the brain. We don't get an image of the brain. We measure the chemicals within the brain. And we've shown that glutathione is a major antioxidant in the brain that's markedly deficient in patients with mild cognitive impairment, Alzheimer's, and Parkinson's. So what does that mean? So as you know, Buck, glutathione is an antioxidant. So Mickey, I'm going to give you a test question. This is a tough one. So if you peel a banana and you leave it out overnight, what color does it turn in the morning?
Brown, black.
Why?
The sugar, because of the glucose, right?
Because it oxidizes.
Winner.
That was a 25-point bonus question.
Boom, let's go.
So it oxidizes. What does that mean? It means the air interacted with the sugar in the banana like rust. You put an iron bar in the rain overnight, it rusts. Well, your brain also rusts. If there's too many free radicals, which occurs with oxidation, and they're not countered in the brain by glutathione.
So is the issue, Dr. Maroon, that you're talking about, obviously oxidation is going to happen as a byproduct of mitochondria doing what they're doing, right? To help us live, to give us energy. But so the oxidation is what it is, but we have less glutathione to actually mitigate the effects of that oxidation?
Yes. As normal aging, our mitochondria become less efficient. Mitochondria are making free radicals all the time when it takes oxygen and glucose to make ATP, which is the gasoline for our cells. The exhaust, like the car burning gasoline, carbon monoxide, in the case of our mitochondrial cells, the exhaust of that, instead of carbon monoxide, is free radicals. If they're not squelched, or if they overwhelm the free radicals, then you get degradation of the DNA, of the mitochondria themselves, and of other proteins. So what we're saying is that the pathogenesis or the cause of Alzheimer's disease is not necessarily the beta amyloid plaque that drug companies are spending billions of dollars to remove from the brain with drugs like lecanemab and others. We're suggesting that the beta amyloid plaque is a downstream event from the oxidative stress that's not squelched.
Okay, and what exactly is oxidative stress? Is that what is happening because of the lack of glutathione? And what causes oxidative stress too?
What causes it? So we said in Alzheimer's disease and Parkinson's disease with aging. But what about traumatic brain injury? If you put in Google oxidative stress and TBI, traumatic brain injury, 50 papers will come up. Oxidative stress is, again, when you get hit in your head and the brain gets damaged. Oxidative stress, the release, again, of these free radicals, the inability of the brain to keep up with the damage in the mitochondria, results in neurodegeneration that we believe is called chronic traumatic encephalopathy, CTE. So our hypothesis is that Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, and traumatic brain injury are related strongly to oxidative stress, meaning the cells get overwhelmed by the free radicals, which damage and cause more damage.
One of the questions I would have for you is, one of the challenges with glutathione is delivery.
Exactly.
And so in particular, getting enough glutathione is challenging enough to get it into your bloodstream. But I would imagine on top of that, getting it through the blood-brain barrier is going to be 10 times as hard.
Absolutely. The quintessential question and observation. So there is a product, which is a precursor to glutathione, called gamma-glutamyl cysteine, which is a hard word, but I'll try to explain. Glutathione is made up of 3 amino acids. And there's glutamine and cysteine, which are 2 amino acids. that are joined together to form gamma-glutamyl-cysteine. Gamma-glutamyl-cysteine then picks up glycine to make glutathione.
It picks up glycine, you said?
And acetylcysteine. If in patients who have overdoses of Tylenol, it uses up all the glutathione in the liver, and then acetylcysteine is a precursor that is the treatment of that. But as you said, it doesn't get to the blood-brain barrier well enough. We believe in their scientific studies that show that gamma-glutamyl-cysteine, the precursor, does get intracellular, and we believe will cross the blood-brain barrier. That's what we're going to prove.
And is that something that you would just take orally?
Orally, correct.
Orally. So you could take pills of this, supplements of this, and that would be potentially more effective than actually taking glutathione itself.
Yes. The product is called Glytine, Glyteine, and it's continualg.com is a website for it, continualg.com. And the product is glytine, but it's gamma-glutamyl-cysteine. And investigators at the University of New South Wales in Australia have spent 8 to 10 years confirming what I just said.
Fascinating. So obviously brain injury is a big deal in the NFL. You hear about guys, especially right now, like Tua Tagovailoa in Miami. I mean, he's repeated concussions. Maybe it would be a good idea just to explain what exactly is a concussion itself. And then on top of that, is it repeated concussions? Is that what leads to this problem that a lot of players are ending up with down the line with chronic traumatic encephalopathy, or CTE? Could you talk a little bit about those two things, since they're talked so much about in the press?
A concussion, by definition, is a transient disturbance of neurological function caused by mechanical forces that leads to impairment of some kind neurologically. It can be loss of consciousness, which occurs in 10% of cases. 90% of the time, it can be associated with memory problems, disorientation, headache, migraine, personality issues, cognitive impairment, or slowing. So that's the definition of a concussion. Probably the greatest contribution we've made in the space of concussions is preventing athletes from returning to the pitch, the field, whatever, before the brain has completely recovered. If you go back while you're still symptomatic from a concussion, less forces can cause more injury. So what the impact does, it's a neurocognitive test that you take as a baseline before you play. If you have a blow to the head, you have to get back to your baseline neurocognitively and also symptomatically. That's number one. Number two, you have to be able to exert yourself aerobically and anaerobically without symptoms. So those are the general criteria. MRIs, CAT scans are virtually always normal in these cases. If they're not, then that adds another dimension that needs to be considered about return to play. So individuals who have a concussion must be kept out at least long enough for their brains to heal. If they do, then the question is, how many concussions are too many? And, there's not general agreement on that. It depends on the severity. It depends on the imaging. It depends on the neurocognitive evaluation. And now we're in the world where biomarkers are on the ascendant to measure various neurochemicals and transmitters and neuronal degradation products in the blood, in the saliva, and even in the sweat, looking at these as biomarkers for concussion management. So that part of it is still under heavy investigation.
Why is it easier for someone to get a concussion after they have had concussions in the past?
In some cases, that's the case. In others, some people are even just more predisposed to having concussions than others. Again, these are all areas of really intense investigation. I was just on a phone call today with a small startup company looking at a new biomarker that emanates from the myelin, Buck, as you would recognize, that surrounds every axon in the brain that gets released with trauma into the bloodstream. That's what they're showing. And it's a very sensitive test. It's a biomarker that will show whether there's long-term effects going on, whether there's lasting damage. So that and tractography, looking at the millions of fiber tracts coursing through that make up the connectome or the wiring diagram of the brain. All of this is being investigated, looked at very carefully.
So it's chronic traumatic encephalopathy. Is that just on the extreme spectrum of repeated concussions?
It's a neurodegenerative process that we think evolves from perhaps multiple subconcussive blows and cumulatively. Again, this is it's an area, again, of very strong investigation. Groups have purported, they looked at over 100 brains of patients with NFL players and concluded that a very high percentage of NFL players have CTE. What's overlooked is a very highly selected sample that they looked at. If I'm studying Alzheimer's disease and I asked anybody with symptoms of Alzheimer's disease donate their brain to my brain bank, I'm going to find a very high percentage of patients with Alzheimer's disease.
Yeah, didn't Junior say I just
shot himself in the chest so that so he could evaluate his brain? Or
because he knew it was from the
concussions.
Yeah,
I've donated my brain to the University of Pittsburgh Brain Bank. Jerome Bettis, you may have heard of him.
Sure.
Jerome and Merrill Hodge and others have done that. So when we expire, they'll have longitudinal studies of my cognition and my lifestyle, and correlate that with any findings in the pathology of the brain so that they have objective data of correlation.
Can we talk a little bit about the role of hyperbaric oxygen in brain trauma? It seems like there's some pretty good data in terms of recovery for people with concussive syndromes. What is it that hyperbaric oxygen is doing?
That's an excellent question. Hyperbaric oxygen is a treatment form that's been around for many, many decades, and initially was used for treatment of the bends, divers who come up too soon, are pressurized to prevent nitrogen bubbles from getting into the brain joints and actually being fatal at times. And it's been found that hyperbaric oxygen, in which you breathe 100% oxygen under pressure so that you force more oxygen into the plasma, heals wounds of the extremities, heals radionecrosis from excess of radiation. And we now know there's a group, Shai Afradi, Amir Hadani, our neurosurgeon. One is the neurosurgeon, Amir Hadani. Many studies on the use of this for long COVID, individuals who have symptomatic fatigue, memory impairment from long COVID, for post-stroke. And also, there was a recent CBS special you can Google last Sunday, the use of hyperbaric oxygen therapy for PTSD, showing dramatic effects in patients with PTSD after therapy with hyperbaric oxygen. And also, I've personally seen very positive effects in post-concussion syndrome that have failed all therapy. Parents have come back and say, "You've given me my son back," or "You've given me my daughter back."
I mean, the mechanism sounds probably pretty straightforward in the brain. You're just, providing more perfusion to parts of the brain that are damaged, that need a little bit more love. That's pretty much.
We just published a paper on that in Frontiers in Neurology. You can Google my name, and neuromodulation. And we discussed the mechanisms by which hyperbaric oxygen is effective, just as you said, Buck. Number one, it's anti-inflammatory. And as you know, the role of inflammation in the body and the brain. Number two, it enhances the production of vascular endothelial growth factor, VEGF, which makes new blood vessels, which is why it can be therapeutic, I think, in stroke. And number three, it enhances the formation of stem cells, new stem cells, and also a compound called BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor, which does three things. It makes new brain cells, new neurons. It makes new synaptic connections between neurons where memory is encoded. And number three, it enhances neuroplasticity, which is what we're doing here. We're taking huge amounts of information and funneling it through our connectome, our wiring, and articulating it, hopefully, in a descriptive, understandable way.
When I think about hyperbaric oxygen, one of the things that does come up is there is sort of an acute period of increase in release of reactive oxidative species. So if you're on a regimen of like 45 days, like I think they're doing in Israel, wouldn't that potentially be something that you'd want to guard against?
That's an excellent observation again, Buck, in terms of oxidative stress. In other words, hyperbaric oxygen causes a degree of oxidative stress. However, it also, the anti-inflammatory aspect of it, and also the production, we believe, of glutathione and other antioxidants and endogenously counters the oxidative stress that does occur.
Well, how about let's go back to the basics of diet, specifically ketogenics. Can you talk about how that contributes to your life and maybe what you're a fan of? And
what, my diet?
You're quite impressive, Dr. Maroon.
I'm an old man, Nikki.
Yeah, you might honestly age maybe, but chronological is different than biological. Have you ever actually taken your biological age test?
I have.
And what does it say?
I'm about 70 years old instead of 84.
Oh,
that's
my
great.
God. That's
good.
Amazing.
14 years.
Yeah.
Wow.
Fantastic.
What test did you use?
The methylation test, True Diagnostics, I think it's called.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's the most, in my view, that's the most accurate thing to do. So congratulations on that. You're going to be doing podcasts another 15 years here when you're,
I love it.
100 years old, and we'll get you on then.
But in order to, because I know when you take these tests, they ask you about, lifestyle. They ask you about diet, very heavy on diet and things like that. So now I'm really curious about your take on diet.
Well, there are five things actually, that are well known that anybody can do to prevent Alzheimer's and neurodegenerative diseases of the brain. I mean, is it preventive? Can you prevent it? Sometimes if genetically you're too predisposed, no. But the things that can be done, number one is exactly what you said, diet. So what can you do in terms of diet? And I've kind of evolved towards the Mediterranean type of diet. Fruits, vegetables, lean protein, a lot of fish, omega-3 fatty acids, and then quite a few different supplements. I'm a big fan of, as I said, fish oil, and curcumin, natural anti-inflammatory, and lysine, N-acetyl-cysteine. They're all, as we talked about, precursors to glutathione. Glycine that I talked about in terms of, again, glutathione precursor. And then besides diet, olive oil, minimal alcohol, maybe a little wine, but there's a whole lot of literature now that no alcohol is the best alcohol. Number two is physical exercise, aerobic activity, strengthening, and resistance exercises. Sarcopenia begins at about age 40. We lose our muscle mass. So unless you do resistance exercises of some kind, bands, weights, as well as stretching for flexibility on a regular basis, you need to do that. And also supplement maybe with creatine and also protein. You got to get enough protein on a daily basis.
Right.
Number 3 is avoiding environmental toxins, smoking, drugs, and again, alcohol, clean air if you can. Where are you folks located?
I'm in Los Angeles.
You're in LA. Good luck.
I'm in Santa Barbara. It's nice. Santa Barbara's nice and clean here.
Santa Barbara's
way better. I know.
But clean air, good water, environmental toxins. Number 3 is controlling stress. Stress is a huge debilitating factor, and it's it turns on inflammation. Inflammation is the common cause of cancer, heart attacks, Alzheimer's disease, arthritis. And so how do you control stress? Prayer, meditation, strong family units, adequate sleep. When we sleep, we get rid of some of the beta amyloid in our brain through the glymphatic system, which is like the lymphatic system of the body. You have a glymphatic system in the brain that flushes out the toxins at night when we sleep and literally restores us to a normal functional brain. It's not rocket science or brain surgery, but that those are the key things that anybody can make those choices.
You talked a little bit before about ketogenic diets as an intervention. And I kind of like that idea because ketogenic diets, basically low carbohydrates, they result in what are called ketone bodies, which we know are that freely go through the blood-brain barrier, whereas glucose requires various transporters to get to the brain. So in treatment of various neurodegenerative diseases, such as Alzheimer's disease, Parkinson's disease, you've advocated for ketogenic diet. Is that right?
You're exactly right. So, I don't know if you've heard of Dr. Thomas Seyfried. Dr. Seyfried is a biologist and cancer investigator at Boston College and has published a wonderful book, The Metabolic Basis of Cancer. And he's shown, in fact, there's a paper just coming out, I just saw it today, coming out soon, on using the ketogenic diet as a adjunct to the treatment of cancer. So what does that mean? When we were on the savannah in Africa, not too long ago, relatively speaking, it was feast or famine. So when we feasted, we built up fat in our body. So when the famine came, what did we do? We burned up the fat to save our bodies and live. So when you burn fat, what is formed? And as you said, Buck, you form ketone bodies. So, ketone bodies can serve the brain in terms of function. So cancer, what is the substrate that supplies cancer to live on and multiply and get bigger? It's sugar. So cancer is a new development in an evolutionarily old body. So if you do a PET scan, you're looking at radioactive sugar to show where the cancer is in your body. So the ketogenic diet deprives the cancer of glucose by having less than 50 grams a day. And then it burns up fat with ketone bodies to save your cells, save your life, literally, what your fuel is. Your fuel becomes ketone bodies. So you starve the cancer and fuel your brain with the ketones from fat that's burned up. This has now become, several years ago when we started writing about this, it was not accepted at all. Now, many innovative oncologists are using the ketogenic diet in conjunction with radiotherapy, chemotherapy, and surgery. So it's the sugar, again, it's a whole new section to talk about what the government has promulgated as a healthy diet in terms of heavy carbohydrates and heavy sugar is the opposite of what we should have, beginning in the 50s and the 60s. So sugar is toxic like anything else in excess amounts.
You're a triathlete. When you talk about longevity, there seems to be two major factors. You mentioned one of them being lean muscle mass, essentially, and the concern of sarcopenia, which is loss of muscle mass over time. The other one, though, VO2 max. Can you talk about what exactly VO2 max is? Because that is one of the biggest predictors of longevity.
Yeah, VO2 max is your ability to utilize oxygen and how much oxygen you can actually use over time. So you literally have a mask that you wear and inhale oxygen under stress. When I says on a treadmill, usually is how it's measured. And your VO2 max is a very significant predictor of longevity. And the more efficient you use oxygen, the more efficient your mitochondria are going to function, and the more efficient your body will work. And this is something that is measurable. And again, like you said, it's another biomarker that is used.
In some of these pillars that you were speaking about, you mentioned one of my favorites, which is spirituality. And I was going to ask if you meditated, and then you told us that meditation and prayer and all these are a part of your secrets, if you will. How do you define spirituality? And then can you tell me how it's contributed to your own health and your own vitality as well?
Yeah, it's a hugely important component of life and living. I wrote a book entitled Square One, The Secret to a Balanced Life. And what I have people do, and you can do this right now, Mickey, draw a square on paper or in your mind. Now, on the top line, put work. On this line, put family, social. On the bottom, put spiritual. And on the other, put physical. Got it? Now, draw a line commensurate, the length of which, how much effort or time you spend on each of these on a daily basis. So how long is your work line? How long is your family social line? How long is your spiritual line? And how long is your physical line?
My physical line is the most, I think. And then spiritual.
When I was in my crisis, my life was a straight line EKG. It was all work. There was no family. I neglected the spirituality, and I was 20 pounds overweight.
You sound like a neurosurgeon.
I was a typical neurosurgeon. That's exactly right. So, I look at that every day. Every day when I get up, I draw in my mind my work. I know that's a given, but I want to be aware. The Buddhists say, be mindful, be aware of what you're doing. I know when I'm going to work out, either morning, evening, or after work, whatever, but I'm going to get that in. And the family, social, talking to my family, connecting. And then the spiritual, as a physician, I've been very blessed in the sense that I'm able to connect with people on a very spiritual level. For instance, if you're waiting on a gurney to be wheeled into an operating room, to have your brain operated upon, you're under a lot of stress. Your cortisol level is off the chart. And what I'll often do is I'll touch the patient, take their hand or their arm, and ask, would you like to say a little prayer? Or do you believe in a higher being? I'm not trying to convert anybody. If they say yes, I say, today's the day the Lord hath made. Let us rejoice and be glad in it. And with your help, get Mary, Mickey, John through their travail. and back to the family. I get more thanks from that 20-second connection. And we know that prayer reduces infection rate, decreases the average length of stay in the hospital, and enhances healing. So it's the body, it's the brain, mind, the mind-body connection. And it's, as you know, Buck, what happens when you're under stress, it's fight or flight. Your sympathetic nervous system is overactive. And what happens when you pray? You're activating your parasympathetic nervous system, which is rest and digest. So it counters and lowers your cortisol. So the mind-body connection physiologically is operant in your sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous systems, the yin and yang of balance and stress.
Really great spending time with you and, learning about your journey. And you also have a book. It's called Square One, which outlines these 4 pillars of for a balanced life, which people should definitely check out as well.
Mm-hmm.
But really do
thank
you. Yeah, thank you so much for your time. And I'm looking forward, actually, Dr. Maroon. I know you're out and about in meetings to bump into you and talk about some of the other folks we know and stories.
Well, thank you very much. It's a great opportunity, and it's how free-flowing things have come. It's been a pleasure sharing personal experiences with you.
Yeah, thank you so much. We're going to take a quick break, and we will be back with your Healthy Takeout. Welcome back to Longevity Junky. Time for the Healthy Takeout. That guy's amazing. I'm so happy. He's so sweet.
It was kind of cool because his contemporaries with all these mentors I had when I was in neurosurgery. So yeah, he's we were talking offline. I was like, I was trained under Julian Hoff, and everybody called him Buzz. And he's like, "Oh, Buzz?" And I was like, "Yep, Buzz Hoff." And he's like, "Buzz is like my brother." And, he passed away a few years ago. And then we were talking about that. And then
that's so cool.
Yeah.
The neurosurgery world or neurosurgeon world, I guess, is quite small then.
It's very small. I mean, there's less neurosurgeons than professional football players, so there's, so there's, so, and then like my mentor in medical school, also Hunt Pazier, who was also, they were both at one point, presidents of the Congress of Neurological Surgeons. Anyway, he knew him very well too. So it was just kind of fun. I mean, small community. Of course, I'm not part of that community anymore, but I was for a period of time, and it was kind of fun to reflect. But I love what he's doing. I think it's it's a good. He's not your typical neurosurgeon. Typical neurosurgeons are. They are so busy saving lives, and I have such admiration for people who go down that route. As you know, as I mentioned before, I didn't finish. I'm switched because I didn't care for the lifestyle. I mean, I needed more sleep. I needed
well, he was saying that he wasn't able to foster like his family and his health and all these things. So yeah, I mean, you have to. You're dedicating your life to helping all these people who need you, right? Like they are at their end and they really, really need you. So it's like you have to give your life up to help all these other people. And it's very beautiful. Also, though, the way that he has come back in his later years and found this balance. Like I love I'm excited to read his book.
Now, how far I've fallen from Dr. Maroon to have ended up doing Brazilian butt lifts, but that's where I ended up.
Oh yeah, because of your plastic surgery. Oh
that's where I ended up. I started out in neurosurgery and ended up, doing stuff
plastic
like that.
Surgery. When I've come back from Colombia, I remember being at the airport, and a lot of these girls just have these random shelf butts that come out, and I'm like,
it's handy. You can put your drink on them.
Yeah, exactly. They look horrible, Buck. I hope
they do. They look horrible. I didn't actually I would, as the surgeon, I would always be like, "Are you sure about this? You really want this?"
It look okay if it's in moderation, I think.
Yeah, I would never do excessive.
But I won't.
I couldn't do it. I didn't have the heart. But
that's
anyway.
so weird. I love that we're now talking about acids. But that's okay. I love it.
So that's a healthy takeaway. It's a healthy takeaway.
It's a healthy takeaway. Yeah, exactly. I love it.
All right.
I'm wearing this out. Longevity Junky is created by Dr. Buck Joffrey, MD, and Timothy Fonara. It is executive produced by myself, Nikki Lee, Buck Joffrey, and Timothy Fonara. The show is produced by Pretty Fast, and Phil Ferragamo is our producer, and original music by Alloy Tracks. We're distributed by our friends at Acast, and see you next time.